an interesting thing to start. I think one of the first government bodies to actually embrace this. So it is kind of a movement that's going. And of course, I think that shift is going to shift our industry.
The basic idea is that there's a groove that I can follow that's exactly right for me. Exactly right for
Hi, welcome to Control Talk Now, your HVAC and Smart Building Controls videocast and webcast for the week ending June 7th. Kenny Smyers, if I'm not mistaken, that's when you stormed the beaches at Normandy about 50, 60 years ago. 2020, this is episode 366, where we talk about the latest trends in HVAC and smart building controls. I am joined by your host and mine, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only. You know him. Say it with me in your head. Kenny Smyers, the control man, secret agent, Ralph Lauren fashion model from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kenny, welcome to the show. Big dog.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And like I say, I don't know how you do it, but you come up with all this real quick, and it sounds good. It's all nonsense because I'm not a secret agent, man, and whatever. But
come on, Kenny, you're very modest. That's what we love about you. But you know, rumor has it too that you were also the original Marlboro man back in the day. Is that any truth to that rumor?
I smoked Marlboros. I smoked my share of Marlboros. That's for sure.
Yeah, but I think I saw you with the cowboy hat and the jeans and all that. You were the original guy they wanted, and I think they weren't paying you enough money, so you backed off of it, right?
No, but remember, just think of how fun. You know, you're talking back with the Marlboro, that commercial with the guy riding a horse into the sunset with a cigarette, lighting a cigarette, was probably one of the most successful commercials, and it probably got millions of people smoking cigarettes. And now look where we're at. And that's
and ironically, the guy died from lung cancer. So the guy that was the Marlboro man. So it's kind of sad. So remember, kids, stay in school, don't smoke.
There you go.
Right?
Well done.
All right, brother. So what's up with you?
Well, you know what, we're recovering. We're back in green. We're seeing some social movement. You know, we're still distancing, physical distancing, as we're going to hear from our guest. That there's a difference between social distancing and physical distancing. We need to maintain our social, closeness, nearness, and for obvious reasons, there's a lot of changes being done. Had some big, things happening, around the world, but in the United States, some amazing. Situational stuff that occurred that we won't talk on our show because we're going to stay out of that political morass. But just some sad things happened. But as far as the COVID-19 journey goes, we are stepping into the green, meaning that we're allowed to go into restaurants now. There's going to be some entertainment available. We're going to have the NFL football season, so you're in the NFL because can win another Super Bowl, hopefully, right?
Well, we're gonna have to compete against Tom Brady twice because he's with Tampa Bay now. So.
Wouldn't it
Him
be
and
marvelous?
Gronkowski both went to the Tampa Bay Bucks.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, they'll see how, he's going to prove his. I think he's going to impress people. The guy, he's for real.
Well, we're going to find out whether it was Belichick or Brady, right? I mean, it's going to answer that question. Of course, John Donahue from Controls Consultants, our friend up here, claims it was all him anyway. So,
well, you know what? Belichick's going to go. They're going to go 10-6, and Tampa Bay's going to go 12-4.
Well, if I was going to write a script for the NFL Entertainment Network, it would have the New England Patriots versus the Tampa Bay Bucks in the next year's Super Bowl. In other words, bring Brady and Belichick head-to-head in the Super Bowl. Now, would that be great entertainment or what?
Sure would be.
All right. So listen, real quick before we bring our guest on, want to hit it up and talk about our sponsor this week. Our platinum sponsor this week from the Control Trends Award, sponsoring this show, is none other than the fine folks from Distech Controls. Martin Villaluz and the team at Distech do a great job. Kenny, anything you want to say about them before we hop into the show?
Martin Villanueva.
Villanous. I said it right. Just truncate the end of it and you won't get in too much trouble.
Well, they are a great company.
Martin.
Well, they got a great team. Scott Hamilton, our guy, Eddie Liming, they just do a good job. And
Lauren Scott and the marketing team.
See, they're shooting. They got a vertical rise here.
They got a vertical rise. So, and again, we appreciate their sponsorship. And for you people that don't know, we are our platinum sponsor for the Control Trends Awards. It's just a little give back, a little I love you for their sponsorship of the Control Trends Awards, which cannot help them without our sponsors. So again, this week it's Distech Controls. All right, Kenny Smyers, we got a big show this week. It's the first of the month, and that means that one of the smartest men in the industry normally comes onto our show, and I think we got him lined up. So how about introducing him?
Very good. I'd love to. We have the one and only Ken Sinclair. We're going to discuss, Ken, who's the owner-editor of Automated Buildings. His June theme is researching and reinventing not normal. And this is really exciting because, I mean, Ken always brings new jargon to our industry and makes it relevant, but we're talking about remote expertise, rebooting, the concept of rebooting, the actual Ken has to defend his use of reboot, and anti-fragility. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much, guys. Always a pleasure.
Well, it's great. So first question I got out of the box is, when you say not normal, I mean, I've been called that mostly my whole life. What about you guys? How many times have you been called not normal?
I've lived a lifetime of it for sure.
Me too. I'd be in the same boat.
So I'm thinking that's probably a good thing to be not normal, but in the context of the article, let's start off with that. Talk about not normal and what inspired that theme.
Okay. I just saw that it was such a radical change that was going on that, and everybody talked about going back to normal, I guess. And it was like, whoa, it's the trouble is we're not going to go back to normal because this working offline has worked so well for us. It has actually leaped over giant problems that we have in communicating, and the whole idea of, driving an hour to work and or flying across the country to have a meeting is under question. And some of the folks that are starting to Zoom say now, wow, I'm way more effective than I was before. So it's kind of changing everything. And the software companies announcing that they will not go back into their offices anytime soon has kind of led us in a different direction. And of course, they have huge benefits in not going back. This is the best of times for them. We're now all dependent on their technology. I don't know if anybody bought Zoom stocks before this started, but it would probably been a good idea. It's a big change. I saw the word not normal to kind of hit people on the head that there's a big change coming. A few people kind of said, yeah, that's negative. I'm scared of not normal. And I never meant it in a negative sense. I meant that it's not going to be normal. It's going to be different. It's going to be better. It's going to be, well, we're actually already on to my next chapter, which I've dubbed Reinvention, Rebirth, and Renaissance. And I'm not just talking about a renaissance of the control industry. I'm talking about everything we're involved in. It is truly like a cultural change.
Well, yeah, say more about that, Ken, because I think you're really onto something. To Kenny's point, you tend to, we call you Notre Dame of Sinclair for a reason. You tend to sort of have a crystal ball and look in the future. So I don't know, because I think culturally there's huge shifts, like you're saying. So speak more about that. What are you seeing, and what do you see? How do you see it 5 years from now? Maybe that's a good way to frame the question.
Well, we kind of take a look at what the virus did is, I always liked starting with, actually, Memori did a take on it when it first got going, and they identified it as the greatest offline working experience in the world that has ever occurred, and it all occurred within a few weeks and months. So that was kind of an amazing thing that all of a sudden we all got sent home, we got rebooted, and we had to go sit in a corner and clear our memories. And but lo and behold, we all were still online, and we were still able to talk about what just happened. Then when we took a look at what happened, we started to question how we're doing everything. And one of the things is we've been caught in a direction where we keep moving more and more towards greater density. Density is more economically drives our ROIs, and then we take a look in the mega city. The mega city has been in a growth for the last bunch of years. But what we see is when something like this happens, the mega city is basically has the greatest problems and the greatest risk, and has the least ability to socially and physically distance. So all of a sudden that starts to raise some questions. At the same time, people are looking at that problem. They've actually moved away from the city or moved into their residence, and now are remote, communicating remotely. And by the way, it's working extremely well. They're able to still keep their national connections, basically talking to people in all the cities. They're actually getting to the actual people they need to talk to, which sometimes was a problem for them. So people in our industry are actually becoming much more effective at getting their message out and getting the communication. The bigger problem is for us is that the thing that we do, automate buildings, the buildings that are being automated are under radical change. And of course, the fact that storefronts are disappearing and commerce is going online is bad news for people who own shopping centers. People that own high rises in the middle of mega cities, it's a concern as well, as the rapid transit creates some problems trying to get people there. So anyway, a bunch of stuff changing, and I think it's changing the attitudes. Another scary thing that's happened is valuable people have gone home, started working remotely for 2 and 3 months. They now understand that their connection to the company isn't quite as strong or as needy. They're not as needy as they thought they would be. They actually see that they could function alone. So when the company says you shall come back on such and such a date, some of them may choose not to come back because they kind of like this whole idea. So we're kind of seeing this whole renaissance change of society that we're basically the opposite of urbanization, where we're basically rurality. I think that's the word Nicholas used.
Disurbanization.
Pardon?
De-urbanization.
Urbanization. That's right. Well, it's back to the farm. I don't think we're going all that way back to the farm, but I think what we did see is people will now put more emphasis on their close community, and so I think what we're going to see is a building of the close community. And then an interesting one that came up in one of our chats was if the shopping centers have struggled getting back, that may become the in-between. We've actually also talked about the in-between. We've talked about the corporate office, we've talked about home, and we've talked about that there is definitely a need for a social puddle in between. And where that may come is we may see the repurposing of shopping centers, because one thing shopping centers have is parking. They have the facilities, they have the food fair. And so maybe what will happen is little offices will spring up inside these offices. The big message that we see is it's repurposing of buildings. And anytime a building is repurposed, it's good for the automation industry. There's another old joke I thought about is remember when I started into the automation industry, one of the old sages told me that we're always either moving towards or away from centralization. And if you look at the automation systems, they did exactly that. We used to have the one computer that controlled the building, then we went to the DDC, then we went to the edge, and then we go to the cloud. And we always got this movement. We're either moving towards or away from centralization. And now our civilization, I think, is kind of doing the same. So there you go. Some great theories from a guy who knows nothing about psychology, but is
well, hang on. Ken, you're saying a whole lot here. Right, Kenny, we got to unpack some of this because we cannot let this go without a little dialogue about it. So first question I have, Ken, is somebody pointed out to me, one of my teachers a long time ago, there are two types of change. There's cyclical change, like this change, like the stock market's going to go up, the stock market's going to go down. Fashion's a cyclical change. The skirts are going to get short, they're going to get longer again, right? And your strategy in a cyclical change is just to time the market, right? Get in when it's low and get ready to go up, sell when it's high. A bit of an oversimplification, but that's one type of change that we see over and over, right? The other type of change, which is less prevalent, is what he called structural change. Structural change took place was once the first computer came out and started working, didn't matter how good your typewriter was, if you were selling typewriters, you could adapt or die. Same thing when the first car came out, right? Horse and buggies, their days are numbered. My question for you, Notre Dame Sinclair, with all this happened during the coronavirus and the things you're talking about, do you see this as being a structural change, meaning your strategy is adapt or die, or more of a cyclical change, which is, yeah, it's going to come back, just wait it out?
I definitely see it as a structural change, and more than a structural, as a society change, which is even bigger. I've not seen too many of those triggered by a reason, I guess. The other comment I made in this next article is that almost instantly we all grew 10 years younger, in the fact that we embraced all of these technologies. We all knew about them, but we never really used them because we were forced to use them. And lo and behold, they actually work. And all that stuff we've been talking about, it actually works, and it's amazing. And I think for the first time ever, we got to see what the millennials were talking about, and how these kids that are born connected think. And another little by the by is the university students this year are not going to be waiting tables as they usually do for their summer jobs. They're going to be wrestling data for the large software companies. What they call them, FAM, all the major software companies, or they're going to be working for startups wrangling data. And what they will do is they will be like cheap help that will help indicate or basically educate the industry on how being born connected works, and educate us on how that's done. If they do a real good job, at the end of the summer they'll have a job, and they'll probably have a job that will be more lucrative than going back to university and trying to invest in what they were investing in, especially if they catch the interest. So there's going to be a big transition. I'm a big advocate of growing the industry younger, but this is going to grow the industry younger real fast.
You said something about your choice was structural, and I know that from reading your editorial, you said something in there that was really interesting, and I want to read it real quick. It says, the connected world is now physically apart, but more virtually connected than ever. I think that's a very profound statement, because to your testimony, I think, number one, I congratulate all the people in the utility worlds. We have uninterrupted gas, uninterrupted electricity, uninterrupted water, and the water industry's taking a big hit. They're down $12 billion because nobody's paying their bills. And their biggest super user customers, like airports or whatever, using 1/20th of what they used to use. But I think the digital world really did survive and flourished during this crisis. I mean, everything from the service you have on TV in our neighborhood. We watched the quality of the presentation, whatever we were watching, was degraded just enough to increase the number of people, so that like Disney and Netflix over in Europe, they made them tone down their quality. Eric, you probably can give us a better explanation, but
Resolution,
I think,
yeah.
And so, and it worked. I'm still just very impressed that despite this incredible event that, like you said, it came on with such sudden fury that it changed everybody forever. There is not going to be any return to a normal. In fact, the real estate things, in we've had bankruptcy one after another. Top Golf just declared, they're going to go for sheriff's sale here in Pittsburgh. It was one of these really cool places to hang out, but that 3 months of shutdown was all they couldn't withstand it. The concept of normal, why we always crave to go back to that sweet spot instead of find a new sweet spot. To me, I remember some of the great movies, those journeys across the migration from people from Europe to America, and then with America from the East Coast to the West Coast. It's a journey, and I think it's difficult to stay comfortable when you're moved from your sweet spots. But this event has moved all of us, whether it was you're attending a funeral, visiting a hospital, buying food. It was just a new experience. And I think a lot of people spent a lot of time at home and got to think things through a little bit. So we waxed philosophical on what's important and what's not. Now, as this applies to buildings and industry, and the structural change we're saying, imagine if you're a vendor and you're trying to figure out some of the things that you're saying about, work at home. They're saying work at home is turning into a quandary now, because the people that aren't driving to and from the work, they want compensated for working from home now. There's a different insurance rate when you're using, everything's changing. We actually got a check back from the insurance company for not driving. I mean, it's like, it doesn't stop as far as daycare centers are suffering, because the moms that work in the offices don't have to go to work, so they're able to stay home and babysit and work at the same time. It's just incredible.
This all sounds not normal to me.
It isn't. And you know, last night in Pittsburgh, we finally went to green yesterday. And I'll tell you what, the roads were surged. There's so many people, and everybody had this excited look. Everybody's crazy drivers, you know, running through red lights. There was an accident where a guy just drew through the red light. He just didn't feel like stopping, I guess. You know, the other guy had a green light, and he thought he was supposed to go. And, you know, it's like, yeah, you're right. It's not normal. And I don't think it ever will be. It's like letting the genie out of the bottle. It's never going to be fit back in. But my concern is, are we working in a better direction? In other words, not to have a fatalist approach, but maybe the new normal wasn't as good. The new normal, the new way we do things won't be as good as the way we used to do them. It'll be different for sure. So, but is it going to necessarily be, you know, better?
Better, yeah.
Well, I think in a big picture, again, this is a weird discussion because, of course, it has nothing to do with automated. Well, it has everything to do with automated buildings because eventually that's where the people live. But it's a migration, I think. So I think there's the fact that people are more susceptible to move to the suburbs. And apparently now some of the articles I read is that was happening at a fairly significant rate anyway. People were moving away from the centers just because the expense, you know, the cost is just so high for living there. And there's an advantage to being in a mega city, but there's a disadvantage as well. And so the fact that I think the whole creation of the mega city was as you went there because there was this gathering of like people who were extremely intelligent in your industry, and you all basically went into this wonderful building and you changed the world. Now the world gets changed by somebody who's twisting their tie while they're looking into their screen in some obscure place we've never heard of. Can have more effect on our society than somebody in a giant building. And so this whole the floating of our intelligence, I guess, is now it's easier for our intelligence to be spread out over a bigger area. So anyway, it allows that. The other thing is, as soon as we do that, then the importance of our community becomes more important. And I think that's a big benefit. Just kind of imagine every little small town in America that is starving to death and has basically been closed down, a steel mill or something like that. All of a sudden, the millenniums and zillenniums come there and, wow, I can buy this old house for for $50,000 and it's got a yard and I can raise kids in it and I can live the American dream.
And a 5G network.
And I can do my technical job.
Right. Well, Kenny, it's interesting because if you think about historically what happened was, originally the money was in the farms, right? So we were globally agriculturally. So most of, people lived on farms because that's where the money was. When the Industrial Revolution came around, they began to move towards cities because of the jobs, right? The Industrial Revolution sort of got surpassed by the technological revolution, which to your point, Ken, you got around like-minded people. So you had a building so you could bring your network into proximity, right? Before the internet got really big. But now what's happened is your community is global. You have access to anybody in the planet. So your physical location is a lot less relevant than, your ability to get on the internet, right? So it's completely shifted that way. I'm supporting everything you're saying. Mm-hmm. So, but then you sort of have to wonder what effect is that going to have economically, and the big question is how does that affect the people in our industry? And you answered one question, which is spaces are changed for repurposed, that creates opportunities for controls and building automation people.
Sure.
But
there's another. Since I'm talking utter nonsense, I'll continue. I mean, none of this is anything to do with science and stuff. It's just sort of observations and maybe the way things might go. But I'm seeing we started pushing around the whole risk management side of COVID, and is that a building problem or is that a client problem? basically the person who leases the building, they come in, they want to take 10 floors to assure that the people on their 10 floors are disease-free, and how are we going to control that? Is that not really is that a building concern, or is that
It's both.
It's both, but I think it's becoming stronger and stronger. So just hold that thought. The other thought now we have is that from a corporate point of view, they have to administer that over a home office, over the corporate office. And what we're talking about is the evolving in between. So the evolving in between, so all of a sudden, this whole thing has become mobile. So my next thought is that a lot of the control industry will now be of greater interest to the person who is leasing the space rather than the building owner. And actually this will become somewhat portable in the fact that it'll be meshed with the corporate platform. And when it's part of the corporate platform and connected to everybody's in that corporation's phone, then they're a little more comfortable about giving all of the necessary data they have to, and the health data, and they can identify their people. And so they can quickly deploy their people to some of these in-between spaces, knowing that they're all safe. And so you started seeing this. So I'm seeing a bit of a separation of the automated control industry from the building owners and from the building, if you can kind of imagine it, floating in air. Now that might scare the hell out of you, but if you actually think it through, the next step is as soon as they start floating that through and they come up with apps that when you come into your space, you can control the windows, you can control the temperature, you can order food, do all of the things that are an integral part of their platform, because they want to kind of control all of those things on a corporate level. What it all means is they're going to reach out into the buildings and they're going to want more control. They're going to want to control more things. The only other thing that's inside of that, I believe, is a greater movement to wireless. But I don't think we're afraid of wireless. It's basically the big advantage is it can deploy, and we might even see it evolve to a situation where the people actually bring their controls with them. Can you imagine that? So I take my space and I'll actually come in and I would locate my wireless sensors. If in fact I have a COVID sensor by that time, I would have bought those and I would put them on the desks in the area I've leased. Kind of seeing a different kind of approach there, but that needs to talk to the building and get information. Are we in fact bringing in the fresh air changes? Are we doing all of the things? So as you can see, I'm talking about stuff that we're going to be doing 10 years, 15 years from now, as I usually am. But if you're interested.
But Ken, you're hitting the point. See, and I agree with everything you're saying, and I love it. I love the fact that we're talking about it, because this is this tip of the spear type of stuff where I think people are afraid really to talk about what their concerns are. But when we talk about markets and buildings, and in each building's a snowflake, excuse me, and we have municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, commercial buildings, retail centers. Each one of them is either going to come out on top or get hit. I think municipalities, they have to function. So you have to have wastewater treatment plants. You have to have court systems. You have to have the buildings that stayed open, the post offices. These governments and municipalities are going to continue. So those buildings would be considered something different. Universities, I'm sorry to say, but I think they're going to be big losers here because of that remote thing that you said, that so much can be done without, by being connected, but not physically next to each other. You can learn from a professor fairly well on an internet setup as the classroom. So schools, what are we going to do with our kids K through 12? Those buildings have got to become safe. The people that work inside them have to be safe. You're going to have a whole different, the privacy issues of who had it, who didn't have it. And to me, this COVID-19 to me is like we moved forward into preparedness, readiness. It reminds me of like the military. So the next time it happens, we've got things stored. We've got masks. We've got toilet paper. So it's a new position of readiness for buildings. The buildings have got to be better. So many people could get away with a haphazard building where the thermostat doesn't really control anything. It's a placebo thing. Those days are over. And wireless, to your point, is going to be the big, quick, rapid deployed system that produces results. You can put a wireless system into a building and have it functioning probably in 2 to 3 hours. I mean, maybe not everything and maybe not the best, but you can have it there where you can measure your temperature, your pressure, your humidity, your CO2. And then we're going to see UV products, and we're going to see bipolar deionization products are going to be required, not just wanted. You're going to have a proactive approach to a building, and then you better document it. You said something about the liability and risk mitigation. I mean, we're just dealing with stuff. This is like, fourth month into this journey that is going to change us structurally forever. And my concern is that, for us in the HVAC world, in the building, automated buildings, for instance, showing leadership here, is that we probably are in the best position to, number one, become, philosophically prepared, understanding this is never going back to normal. Number two is vet out the products and all the technologies and bring wireless and these things to the forefront and give people options and give people good, better, best, but get it going. And I think the younger people, I don't really understand those guys that you were saying aren't going to be waiting on tables anymore. They're going to be guys and girls that are going to be brought into the system because the new job markets are going to be processing data and entering data into databases. I just don't see how that happens. I mean, I'd love to believe that's going to happen, but I think our education systems were caught flat-footed too. The way we're educating our young people to learn to become good citizens, I guess, become good parents and good people in general, don't give us that head start quick enough to do it. We're still making people learn about ancient Egypt, and you're talking about China, India, Egypt, Greek, Romans, Paris, Austria, Edinburgh, Silicon Valley, the migration of intellectual, the critical mass points. Eric and I followed that for a while, where if this is going to happen digitally, will it happen, like they said, like the centers of intellectual powerhouses, like I remember Austria being one, Vienna, all the musicians and all the medical people for 50 years, that was concentrated. Then went to Edinburgh, Scotland, and it changed our economics, our political, everything was in that one place. And Silicon Valley, to me, driving through there, I remember being impressed, thinking, my goodness, this little area here is controlling 25% of the world's commerce, the world's business. The biggest companies in the world are right here, neighbors to each other. I don't know what the next thing is going to be, but it doesn't appear like they're going to be in those buildings. So Silicon Valley could basically dissolve at this point because nobody's coming to work, and they're proving they didn't need to be there. So it's all a facade, or it was a structure, but now the structure broke down. It's not needed anymore. I don't know what happens after that.
That's great commentary. I love everything you opened up. But the other thing that I'm seeing here is, if you can get your mind around why a mega city was created, I think now we get to see why a mega software identity will be created. It's the same thing as the folks of like minds will basically join, and it's so easy for them to join, and they don't have to move. They can live anywhere they want to live. And the other thing is there's the home, the office, and the in-between. The in-between doesn't have to be a physical place that is anywhere particular. The in-between can be the beach, the ski hill, and that's the way the young folks want to basically deal with that. But there's a bunch of stuff going on here for sure. But back to my comment about the software companies, I think probably poach would be a great word, is they will poach these folks because they can hire them at minimum wage. I mean, like, wouldn't you like to hire a data scientist at the minimum wage?
Sure.
This guy is smart, and if you can work with him and he works with you and he sees what you're doing, he can help you. It doesn't even matter. The control companies, it's probably the master systems integrators should be doing the same thing. And they should be saying, oh my God, I can hire that kid to sweep the floor, or I can hire him to be my data scientist. You kind of getting the thing there. So I think what's happening, the education system is going to have to radically change. There's no doubt about that. And I know what happened in the States, but here, all of our universities, they finished out the year. They basically they got their credits and everything. They did everything online. They had to, all their testing and stuff, all of their lectures were moved over. And again, it was not that hard. I mean, they were using that as a portion. They're going to the lecture theaters and they were showing a PowerPoint or showing a video of a good presentation, and then, you know, doing the dialogue. So now they just do the dialogue on Zoom. In a lot of ways, it's even more effective. So it's kind of redefined, you know, the whole university thing. What's happening on a school level is I don't know what's happening in the US, but in Canada, we're starting to see a situation to try and maintain the social distancing. They keep calling it social distancing, but it's really physical distancing that is we're trying to achieve. But what they may do is they will break the classes into at least half or maybe more, and so we can keep the physical distancing. So the kids will go half day to school and have a social encounter with all of their friends and stuff, and then they will have half a day online. And nothing prepares them for the world better than that. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the way
you
we
can
live.
at least the world that they're going to be living in. I
Yeah.
want to hop in real quick because I do have two small kids, and I can speak to what happened with Evie, who is now a first grade graduate. That's my daughter, and she had homework every day. Her teacher sent her, and every day she would be on with the teacher and four other students. So now they didn't come out and say this, Ken, but I think what the teacher was then able to do was to group the kids sort of by their understanding, right? So if somebody's having trouble, a group of those, she can spend more time going over particular things to get them caught up. If they're really getting it, she can push them more. So as I told Ken, I think the biggest challenge we have with the schools, if we were going to reinvent the schools right now, we probably would do more of that. But so many people rely on the schools as a place to drop their kids off, and one function they serve is a babysitting function, right?
Good
So
parents.
yeah, as parents. So but in terms of the education, I see nothing suffering from the remote classroom. You know, and again, they're young, but it was amazing how well they adapted. And even Axel, who's in pre-K, would have days where there'd be 3 or 4 other kids on, and the teacher would be facilitating teaching and social conversations and stuff like that. So outside of it being an additional strain on us, it worked really well.
You know, it's interesting.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Ken. No,
Oh, it was an interesting thing is before the virus, we were trying to protect them from the amount of time they spent online, and it actually turned out that their prowess of how they could function online, how they actually also, I think, fared as well, if not better than us socially during this, because they are all connected with their phones. The only frustrating thing for my granddaughter was to have to learn how a PC actually works, and this Zoom stuff, and how annoying that is compared to phone technology. I thought that was pretty interesting. You have to learn this whole dinosaur technology and that's to us, that we're amazed with a laptop. To the kids, it's just a pain in the butt. And when you actually start explaining it to them, and like, okay, now you're in Google Chrome, now you're in Windows, and it's like, yeah, but you got it. And it was like, okay, I have to learn that before noon. I have to learn how to Zoom before noon tomorrow, because my drama class is on Zoom. And so a lot of things going on. I think they learned more in the last couple of months than they probably learned in the last year.
Well, they probably did. And Ken, I want to hop into something else you talked about maybe those, shopping centers being repurposed for other functions. And I think you and Kenny and I both remember a book back in the 80s called Megatrends by a guy named John Nesbitt. And it was basically the trends that he was predicting for the next 20 years. And one chapter was called High Tech, High Touch. And what he was saying is, human beings, the more technology we get, and the more we are less interacting like face to face and via technology, the more we need touch, right? So, or human connection. So I think one of the things he was predicting was like massage therapist business would be going up and so on and so forth. But so the question is twofold for both you guys. Do you think that premise still holds with what we're seeing now with technology? And if so, how do you see the high touch thing sort of being played out and that need being met?
I think the high touch thing will come out to the community. I think our communities will be stronger. Our close communities will all be stronger as a result of this, because we've actually spent time in them, which we really didn't. We used to flip off to the office, and so if you're going to buy something, you might buy it in the city rather than buying it in your little local community. So all of a sudden, you actually get to know the stores that are in your community, and I think there's all kinds of opportunity to actually rebuild the community around us. So I think that's an interesting.
Well,
Ken.
I don't want to be a bummer or anything, but and Ken, I love the way you're talking. And when you said that about the shopping centers having that parking lot, and that's a premium, and then having the store right next to the grocery store is empty now because the bakery went bankrupt, and then the next door over is a big furniture store, and they just maybe might reopen, maybe not. But you're right; those areas will become magnets for a lower cost presence in a closer community area. But
We'll all become mollies.
yeah, I can see it. It
People
makes
hang out
perfect
at
sense.
mall.
It makes perfect sense. But here's some of the things that with the high tech, high touch, and everything. By the way, I love that book. It was one of the few books. I think it was like the first book that woke me up, and it made sense to me. That the world was going to be changing, and have a visionary say this stuff, and then watch it come true is kind of crazy. But I think we've got to balance this out with the you're saying about buying stock in Zoom if we only knew, but what about the monster Goliath that has just now surpassed? We read a book called Four, where you had Apple, you had Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And the whole purpose of the book was this T algorithm, the first one to get to $1 trillion. And of course we know that Apple's already surpassed $1 billion and gone back down, and Amazon has surged so far now in a global thing, and maybe Alibaba too. I never even really heard about Alibaba, but now they're advertising everywhere on LinkedIn, and you can't ignore it that they're making some kind of surge too. But the mechanism to bring products and things that you need to your doorstep, this magic delivery process. If you sign up for their best customer program, you get free shipping and whatever. I mean, just to me now that worked too. That Zoom, worked digitally. We're using it right now. It's magnificent, and it seems to get better. The quality seems to get better. Amazon performed magnificently. No matter what you say or how you criticize or whatever, the idea of ordering something online and having it at your house the next day still flabbergasts me. So that you don't have to go shopping anymore. So my neighbors, I see them. I see the trucks come up. And you can buy your wine and liquor on the internet now, and it's delivered. There's also that this is going to be, that surge that will never be let back. Amazon, I believe, leaped forward. Eric, you might know better than me. I don't know what their stock does or anything, but they grew by so many percentage, and now they advertise so heavily. They're building a 1 million foot fulfillment center here by the Pittsburgh airport. And so how do we, is that a good thing or a bad thing that while we think there's going to be a regression from the cities to the suburbs, and we're going to see the suburbs enriched economically by repurposing maybe shopping centers that right now are half empty, where does the reality of of Amazon fill into, because people are becoming dependent upon them, especially the elderly and the middle-aged people that don't like to go shop, and they're now used to staying at home. Now they rely on Amazon. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I give to you, Eric and Ken.
Well, I think one observation is yes, because it can provide a now solution. But I think as we kind of reawake to our close community, we may start reverting back to, because shopping is not all that bad of an experience, we actually might go down to the little specialty shop that somebody created yesterday and selling something that's of interest to us, and buy some stuff and have a social interaction, and then meet with some people. One of the criticisms of all of this is that it focuses us all on what the subject of the Zoom meeting is, and we lack the randomness that happened at the water cooler. You bumped into somebody who you didn't even know who they were, and you started chatting with them, and they gave you the next big idea of how to solve your problem. And ironically enough, there's even software programs now that emulate basically chat rooms that bring you into randomness, and they're starting to see that. So there's a bunch of changes there. Back to Amazon is going to is obviously going to expand, but there's still, I think there's a movement, especially in Canada. We're seeing more of a back to the earth kind of a thing, more sustainability. People are not even scared trying to grow their own food and stuff like that. So they've got a few things growing in the back garden, and they're more interested in the. I think the other question that came out of all of this is how this global food supply is how exposed we are. Actually, in Canada here, we had a tremendous problem, especially in Western Canada, that our food supply, when we took it apart, the slaughterhouses and stuff, was totally controlled by immigrants. And ironically enough, not ironically, but sadly enough, one of them got badly infected, and so we had like a whole meat packing plant, slaughterhouse, that went down, and we had like 50, 60, I think actually we got into the hundreds of folks that were done with this. But what it said is, here we are, and that was like a third of the supply of food of meat for Western Canada or something like that. So that kind of a thing, it made us take apart our supply chain. And are we really comfortable with that? Because that's pretty susceptible. And I think what it does is, if you actually think about that, is if in fact the trucks can't roll and the global food supply gets contaminated or any other change. So I think there's a bit of a pulling back, back
it
again.
happened to the States too, Ken. The same thing happened to the States.
Yeah. Okay.
Poultry farms and then the big meat packing thing. In fact, in Italy, my friend lives over in Venezia. He's runs a commissary for the DoD. He told me why Italy had such a huge COVID-19 issue is that they import 100,000 Chinese come right from Wuhan directly to Italy, and they work in all the fabric industries, the purse industries, the automobile industries, the car parts industries. They actually have a little China in Italy that has a community of a huge amount, a couple 100,000 people. And so they were the ones that came right from Wuhan, brought it into Italy, and that's where it was distributed from those areas where they worked. And then all the tourists that came in, because it's maybe an hour and a half from Florence and Venice and different places. So it was kind of an interesting thing that I did not know, but that's why Italy was so hit with COVID-19, was because they had direct labor pools coming from Wuhan to Italy with the infection.
Right. Well, and that's a good point, Kenny. But getting back to your original question about the Amazons and so on and so forth, I think the answer is yes and no. I think, Amazon from a stock perspective is a really good bull market stock. They do really well when the market's going up. And of course, we've been in a bull market for the last 14 years. It defies logic how the market keeps going up. So I think Amazon provides some really great services, like you say, to the elderly and people like that. Their ability to deliver is always going to be great. The thought process on Amazon is when it slows down, and of course we've read Bebos's book, Kenny, you and I both have, and his philosophy is, he makes no bones about it, is I'll eliminate all the competition, then I'll worry about making a profit, which embedded in that is, well, once I eliminate the competition, I'm going to raise my prices. To Ken Sinclair's point, I think what makes this a really interesting time is I agree with the whole community thing. We're going to be, that high touch is going to come from, that we refer to regarding megatrends, high tech, high touch is going to come from our local communities and our local sort of bonding. An example that I come up with when you ask the question, Kenny and Ken, is that if you think about, for example, Harley Davidson, the motorcycle, I mean, they have outdone everybody else's motorcycle, not necessarily because they have a better product, but they focused on creating that community. So it meant something to ride a Harley, right? And if you do their case studies, you realize their whole marketing was around how do we have people, become part of the Harley community. So I'm wondering if we're going to see the savvy businesses come up with sort of creating those communities vis-a-vis a product or whatever in such a way that people get that high touch fix from being part of a product community.
Okay, one of my daughters works for Shopify, which is a Canadian company that if you maybe from a simple point of view is almost like a mini Amazon. But their big claim to fame is they basically sell you a subscription and you bring your company online and they help you with the marketing. They do the delivery, they do the commerce, they do all of that for you. So let's just say that my brick and mortar store just tanked and nobody's coming. I can, by next Wednesday, I can have an online store up and operating, and their business is just going wild, as you can kind of imagine. And actually, it'll be interesting to see that those folks that actually make that transition, if they actually are in a year, they're actually physically earning more money and have less expenses. So there's all kinds of opportunities.
Well, fantastic. Well, listen, let's begin to wind it down a little bit. And Ken, any final comments on the June edition of AutomatedBuildings.com?
I'm really pleased that we've got some real good information and some links to some great resources. But like I say, it's very difficult to talk about technology without sort of talking about the social changes. It's kind of it's a whole new area for me because I try to avoid this, but this time you can't really avoid it, I think, because it is going to reshape the industry. And we're not sure how much it's going to reshape it either. But the big thing too is that it's hit us on the nose, and we're going to get over the COVID, no doubt about that. But the problem is this can happen again, and then it's also opened up. It can happen in our food chain. It can happen almost anywhere. The transportation industry, I'm not sure that's really going to take the biggest hit. The transportation and the holiday industry. Although we had some ideas there, as we talked about repurposing the shopping mall. Maybe we repurpose a cruise ship that, in fact, Ashery, instead of being in Chicago, is on a cruise ship. So everybody that goes on that cruise ship is in our industry and somewhat deemed safe, and we all have a common thing, and we go and have a good time somewhere. And
that would be cool. I like that.
And the meeting kind of thing. So so that whole repurposing and basically unhinging our mind and thinking into not normal is my thing. And I truly do believe it is going to be a renaissance. It's when we're done all this, when we're doing this 2-3 years from now, will be interesting. Although typically I go back and I'm still pulling out information from 10 and 20 years ago on our website that we basically talked about. It's just starting to happen now. I don't know. It takes forever for this stuff to happen. You don't have to be smart to predict what's going on in this industry. It's got to be patient.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love that picture in your background, Ken. That's as cool as I've ever seen, man. It's so marvelously constructed, and you took that picture, right?
Yes, actually, that's a fall streak. I didn't know what a fall streak is, but that hole there is, it's basically what happens is the cloud freezes, and it does like a super quick freeze, and then all of the middle of the cloud falls out, and it's called a fall streak.
Wow.
Amazing.
And there was one occurring in front of our house, so I just took the picture at dawn, and it is my favorite picture kind of thing.
So
the other thing I got a few more quips on it that I love is I can say Chicken Little was right, the sky is falling.
All right.
But Kim, when it falls, does it just turn into rain? Does it just
No, it comes out as ice crystals.
Oh wow! So if you're out in your sailboat, you don't want to be underneath one of those things. Right?
Yeah, well, it would look like snow kind of thing because it's by the time it hits the ground and stuff. But it just instantaneous. If you actually just Google fall streak. But anyway, so you heard it here first. The sky is falling, and for all those my IT people, there's a hole in the cloud.
Nice.
Hey, Eric, you got to bring us home, baby.
Yeah, well, no, I'm bringing home. So yeah, Ken Sinclair will be performing live at the Ashray Comedy Store on the boat. He's got
Yeah.
more of this coming. But hey, real quick, guys, thank you so much. The only question I'm left with, Ken, when you talk about repurposing, is what are our wives thinking about? How are they going to repurpose us? So I'll leave you with that. But automatedbuildings.com, the June issue's out. Check it out. Ken Sinclair, as always, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Ken.
Good fun. Thanks.
Looking forward to next month.
Well, Kenny, as usual, Ken Sinclair, always insightful. I particularly enjoyed this week's conversation because we got away from the bits and bytes and blinking lights into a little bit of the esoteric, philosophical nature of our business.
Bits and bytes and blinking lights? Did you do that? Did that just happen? Was that spontaneous?
It just happened. Yeah, it just happened.
That was
Bits
nice.
and bytes, bits and bytes and blinking lights. That's what we do, right?
I'm writing that down.
You haven't used that? You haven't said when your kids say, Dad, what do you do? You haven't said I do bits and bytes and blinking lights?
I haven't, but I like it.
Your grandchildren will get you with that. You'll probably come up with something different. So
bits and bytes and blinking lights. Dang.
Went from there to the esoteric, the philosophical, and
well, it was fun, because we, like you said, but I think you have to have the mindset first to really to be able to accommodate the change that Ken's saying. There's no normal again, which I agree, but you have to have a comfort with this change, and I think if you're you have to be good and you have to be 100%, and before you can help somebody else, you have to take care of yourself mentally for this, and as we see ourselves move into like the green zones, and we're seeing less and less in place social or whatever it was, shelter in place, I guess was the term,
right.
But to see what's going to happen in the future with schools and commercial buildings, I mean, it's exciting, but it's scary.
Well, it is. And I think, too, that anytime you're in a place of rapid change, which I think we are, there's a concept called going meta, or looking at it from above, right? I mean, normally we stay down at a certain level. We're talking very practical, very realistic, this type of controls, bits and bytes, blinking lights, and so on and so forth, right? And when you get in a time of change, you really need to bring as much perspective. You need to go meta, which is what Ken Sinclair is so great at, taking us up, looking down on it, and then bringing in history, because history repeats itself. When this particular circumstances we're dealing with are unique, but the situation it's happened throughout history, right? I mean, instead of coronavirus, maybe it was a black plague. Instead of technology being what it is, maybe it was agricultural revolution, maybe it was the industrial revolution. All those had massive impacts on the participants that were alive at that period in time, and you can learn from what happened there. So the Industrial Revolution changed everything, Kenny. It was every bit as huge as what we're going through right now.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to our next week's show, and you need to bring us home, baby.
Well, I'm going to bring you home. So next week we have Fred Gordy, our friend, lined up. He'll be on next week with some exciting new technology he'll be telling us about. So with that, again, a special thanks to our sponsor for this week's show, Distech Controls. And a special thanks to our guest this week, the one and only Ken Sinclair. You can check out the June edition at automatedbuildings.com. And with that, Ken Smyers, be bold, stay in control, put your mask on, and go out and say hi to somebody.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny Smyers.
What do you think? I mean, I like the way you're splitting up this stuff.